I never imagined I'd open my door to find animal control officers standing there, equipped with tranquilizer gear and formal documents. All because my service dog dared to be near Patricia Cromwell's prized lakefront home. Yet at 6:45 a.m., on an utterly calm Tuesday morning, there they were, appearing awkward as my 70-pound golden retriever, Bailey, wagged his tail so vigorously that his whole rear end swung back and forth like a pendulum. "Sir, we've gotten a report of a dangerous, unregistered attack dog at this residence," the taller officer stated, shifting his gaze between his clipboard and Bailey, who had just placed his beloved tennis ball at the man's feet in the classic canine invitation of, "Please toss this for me." The officer's colleague was already crouching to scratch Bailey's ears, prompting him to flop onto his back for belly scratches, his service harness sliding aside to display the certified patches and ID tags. "That's Bailey, my trained guide dog," I replied, tracing my fingers along the doorframe for balance. "I'm legally blind, and he's been my companion for years. His documentation is all up to date, and I can provide his certification from the International Guide Dog Federation if required." The officers shared looks that I could detect more than observe the specific awkwardness that arises from discovering you've been dispatched on a pointless mission. My name is David Hartley, and I'd relocated to Pine Ridge Lake only 3 months before, searching for the tranquility my physician swore would ease the migraines that had plagued me ever since the automobile crash that stole most of my sight 5 years prior. The cabin had been my late grandmother's, a comfortable 2-bedroom retreat with a surrounding deck, ideal for Bailey to lounge in the sun while I handled my remote work as a freelance audio engineer. The initial encounter with Patricia Cromwell happened when she presented herself as the HOA president. Before I'd even completed emptying my moving van, she positioned herself there with her clipboard and tape measure, literally assessing the spacing of my garbage bins while lecturing me on the association's rigorous appearance guidelines, and how my grandmother had been exempted from certain infractions that would demand prompt fixes. "Your dog must be registered with the HOA," she proclaimed, regarding Bailey with the sort of distrust typically aimed at unsolicited solicitors. "We enforce tight regulations on aggressive breeds, and that creature appears to have some German Shepherd in it. We cannot permit hazardous dogs to endanger our community members, particularly close to the shore where kids are playing." I'd clarified calmly that Bailey was a pure golden retriever, roughly as threatening as a plush toy, and far more crucially, a service guide dog safeguarded by the Americans with Disabilities Act. Patricia had snorted and scribbled on her clipboard, grumbling about reviewing the covenants and potential risks before stomping off in her sequined flip-flops that clacked on the driveway like a furious keyboard. The following weeks turned into an expert lesson in subtle torment masked as HOA oversight. Patricia submitted reports about Bailey's alleged excessive barking whenever he'd signal me to visitors at the entrance, which was precisely his role. She alleged his wandering breached leash requirements, even though he was visibly in his guide harness and on duty. She went so far as to cite me for incorrect waste handling when Bailey did his business in my private yard, asserting I required special licenses for business-related pet activities. I'd retained each notification, each absurd penalty effort, each menacing note demanding instant adherence concerning my unrestrained pet. My lawyer acquaintance in the city had chuckled heartily when I'd forwarded him pictures of the grievances, particularly the one in which Patricia asserted Bailey's mere existence was lowering home values and fostering an unfriendly atmosphere for compliant neighbors. The HOA gatherings evolved into a recurring spectacle where Patricia would devote full sections to the persistent canine issue at my lot. Fellow homeowners would fidget uneasily in their portable seats as she displayed fuzzy images snapped from her land, depicting Bailey engaged in alarming acts such as napping on the deck, transporting my mail pouch, or tossing a ball with the Morrison children from a couple of doors away, who utterly loved him. "This beast lunged at me only yesterday," Patricia announced during one session, brandishing a picture that plainly depicted Bailey strolling peacefully next to me on the path. I scarcely avoided serious injury. I had to dive into the Henderson's azalea shrubs to escape mauling. The Hendersons, seated a few rows behind, appeared confused. Given that their azaleas were a solid 50 feet from the walkway and enclosed by an ornamental barrier, the conflict intensified as Patricia began enlisting allies to her campaign. She'd ambush neighbors by the shared mailboxes, circulating stories of Bailey's purported ferocity. She'd upload alerts on the neighborhood Facebook group, urging vigilance and safeguarding our kids from the loose beast at Lot 47. The majority disregarded her, though several of her bridge group friends started veering across the road upon spotting us approaching, gripping their handbags as though Bailey might abruptly crave high-end leather. Next arrived the surveillance camera episode. Patricia had mounted numerous devices pointed straight at my house, insisting it was for recording evidence of my continuing breaches. The lenses recorded Bailey's daily routine, from his early guiding tasks to his midday rests. She'd assemble weekly footage compilations for the HOA committee, enhanced with sinister soundtrack overlays she'd edited in, highlighting Bailey's hostile actions such as yawning, extending his limbs, and once shockingly swishing his tail toward a passing butterfly. I attempted to discuss it rationally with her, even extended an invitation for coffee to introduce her to Bailey. Appropriately, she declined, stating she wouldn't jeopardize her well-being by stepping on a grounds harboring an assault dog. I proposed convening at the communal facility instead, with Bailey securely leashed and composed. Yet she'd maintained that would constitute supporting risky conduct and endangering additional community members. The tipping point occurred when Patricia started contacting different authorities. Initially, it was the health inspector alleging my pet setup was generating unhygienic circumstances. They discovered no issues, naturally just a tidy lawn, and a dog whose vaccinations were current. Next, she contacted code enforcement, alleging that Bailey's doghouse, which he never actually used since he always slept indoors, breached construction regulations. The inspectors arrived, took measurements, snapped photos, and confirmed it was entirely compliant before expressing regret for bothering me. Every unsuccessful effort merely fueled Patricia's resolve. She launched a petition to prohibit hazardous dogs within the HOA, deliberately crafting ambiguous wording that might target any canine exceeding 30 pounds. When that didn't gather sufficient signatures, she attempted to force a fresh policy mandating muzzles for all dogs in shared spaces, pointedly referencing fabricated recent events that lived solely in her mind. The morning when animal control arrived marked the third occasion she'd summoned them. On the prior two visits, they'd performed a routine inspection, verified Bailey's documentation was complete, noted his mild disposition, and dismissed the matter. Yet Patricia had adapted from those experiences. This round, she asserted, Bailey had lunged menacingly at several homeowners, that I'd declined to restrain him, and that she'd observed him prowling after youngsters at the playground day. Remarkable feat, considering I'd spent that whole day in the city for a doctor's visit. Once, the officers departed with repeated apologies and a caution to Patricia regarding submitting fraudulent complaints. I realized it was time to pursue genuine measures. I began by submitting an official grievance to the HOA board concerning harassment and bias related to disability. I attached duplicates of each citation, each image Patricia had captured, and each bogus claim she'd submitted. I further provided affidavits from residents who'd seen her conduct, such as Mrs. Morrison, whose children viewed Bailey as their favorite fluffy pal, and Tom Henderson, who was fed up with Patricia incorporating his azaleas into her invented stories. The HOA board president, not Patricia, but a senior gentleman called Robert Garfield, who typically allowed her to dominate the sessions while he napped, was stunned by the evidence. He'd been unaware of the surveillance devices, the misleading notifications, or the full scope of Patricia's crusade. An urgent board session was scheduled, where I laid out my position, assisted by my lawyer, who joined remotely and outlined in precise language how Patricia's behavior infringed not only HOA rules, but national statutes. The Americans with Disabilities Act is unambiguous, my attorney declared, his tone echoing through the community hall via the laptop audio. Targeting a person with disabilities due to their service animal constitutes discrimination. Submitting phony reports, seeking to limit entry to public zones, and fostering an antagonistic residential setting are all prosecutable violations. Mr. Hartley has displayed extraordinary patience by not pursuing litigation yet. Patricia attempted to justify her stance, insisting she was merely safeguarding the neighborhood and adhering to routine HOA protocols. However, when questioned for concrete examples of Bailey's alleged hostility, she could only stammer about broad worries and hypothetical dangers. The remaining board members grew visibly uneasy as she entangled herself further, particularly when she alleged Bailey was an imposter service dog in spite of his authenticated credentials and my verified impairment. The decision was rapid and consistent, with Patricia withholding her vote in objection. She was ousted from her role as HOA president without delay and prohibited from lodging any grievances about bail, why absent video proof examined by the entire board. Moreover, she was ordered to dismantle the cameras directed at my home within 72 hours or risk lawsuits from the association. Directly, but the true repercussions emerged as news circulated about the reasons for her dismissal. Patricia's realty career, which she developed by positioning herself as the local authority who knew all about Pine Ridge Lake, suffered a severe blow. Prospective clients avoided partnering with a broker who'd been expelled from the HOA board for prejudiced treatment of a resident with disabilities. Her photographs on local bus stop benches shifted from a strength to a drawback. Then arrived the correspondence from the Department of Justice. My lawyer had lodged an official protest over the harassment, prompting them to initiate a probe into Patricia's conduct. The possible penalties for breaching the ADA began at $25,000 for an initial violation, plus extra sanctions for every misleading report lodged. Patricia's counsel urgently recommended settling privately, leading her to cover maternity costs, contribute a significant sum to the Guide Dog Foundation, and complete compulsory education on rights for individuals with disabilities. The ultimate setback occurred during the yearly HOA elections 3 months afterward. Patricia, reduced to an ordinary homeowner, sought a spot on the architectural review panel. She garnered precisely 3 votes, likely from her bridge club companions who'd remained loyal amid the controversy. The incoming HOA president, Mrs. Morrison, prioritized revising the covenants to expressly shield service animals and their owners from mistreatment. As for Bailey and me, we eased into lakeside living without disturbance. The Morrison youngsters still drop by for games of fetch. Tom Henderson greets us from his azaleas each dawn, and the refreshed HOA board even spotlighted Bailey in their bulletin within a piece on neighborhood acceptance. Patricia remains 4 homes away, yet she veers to the opposite sidewalk upon noticing our approach, though now it appears driven more by shame than alarm. The surveillance equipment was removed. The bogus complaint ceased, and Pine Ridge Lake transformed into the serene haven I envisioned upon moving in, a tranquil spot to recover and labor alongside my loyal guide. Occasionally, I sense Patricia glancing through her drapes as Bailey and I pass, but she remains silent. The latest rumor is she's pushing the HOA to control Pool Noodle Shades, a campaign that feels much better suited to her specific skills. On serene mornings, as Bailey leads me toward the water for our routine stroll, I reflect on how events might have unfolded differently had Patricia chosen to learn rather than dread the unfamiliar. But then Bailey signals a branch ideal for tossing, and I'm reminded that certain individuals opt to perceive dangers where others recognize opportunities for bonding. I hurl the branch. Bailey races toward it in unbridled delight, and somewhere in our wake, a drape swiftly shuts. Justice was delivered not through fury or retribution, but via facts, records, and legislation, fulfilling its intended purpose, safeguarding the vulnerable from those who misuse their modest authority. Patricia discovered that holding the HOA presidency didn't grant her authority to judge her neighbors' existences, particularly when those neighbors were simply striving to exist calmly with the assistance they required. Her $25,000 penalty and permanent prohibition from any HOA leadership role stood as a caution that bias carries repercussions. Regardless of how many surveillance devices you mount or fabricated claims you submit,